Ukraine reaching a ceasefire agreement with pro-Russian rebels today. It went into effect just about 2 hours ago. In the meantime, NATO rolling out plans to counter Russian President Vladimir Putin. Now, the alliance will create a rapid response force using thousands of troops to prevent any future Russian aggression in Europe. Joining me now, McFarland, a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense and a Fox News national security analyst. Hi there, KT. Let's talk about this rapid reaction force. Could that actually stop Vladimir Putin?
Well, 4,000 is a nice rapid reaction force. The problem is, we've talked about this in the past. NATO has pledged in the past they would have these kinds of rapid reaction forces, and they never got around to doing it. The other thing the president said is our NATO allies have agreed that they're going to increase their defense spending. They're all going to get up to 2% of GDP for their new NATO contributions and defense spending. They've not done that in the past. They promised to, but they haven't.
We've just learned that that's actually optional, that you could give up to 2%. I would love for my taxes to just be optional. But nevertheless, so those countries haven't fulfilled their promises before. Why on earth would they do it now?
Well, and particularly, it's a good point, Heather, because all of the European countries, including now Germany, are having economic doldrums. So why can they make the case to their own people, look, we're going to cut other programs, we're going to increase our defense spending? But, Heather, there was something in the speech that the president, or the press conference today, that really struck me. Yesterday, the president made a very passionate address to the Estonian people. Remember, Estonia is one of those 3 Baltic states. It's a member of NATO. And he said, Estonia, if you're attacked, we will all come to your defense, which is what people think the NATO treaty says. An attack against one, we all come and help defend that nation. Today, the president used a different phrase. He said, an armed attack. Now, if you look at that NATO treaty, it says armed attack. It doesn't say attack. Now, it sounds like this is sort of an in-the-weeds conversation. It's not. Because Putin's warfare tactics in eastern Ukraine and Crimea was to never have an armed attack. It was to have this sort of vague, gray area
you mean because it was done
with, what would happen if Putin tries to do this again?
Because it was done with rebels instead of men wearing actual Russian uniforms? Is that what you mean?
Yeah. Exactly. And when I was in Kiev in June, Heather, they called them little green men. They were clearly Russian special forces, but they'd taken the Russian insignia off. It was Russian military equipment, but there was no signage on the side of the trucks and of the convoys.
Okay, so that is something that we will watch that. Putin potentially exploiting a loophole. I want to ask you about this because a ceasefire was announced today. President Obama, if you caught this, said that it was basically because Vladimir Putin was feeling the effects of sanctions when really the president of the Ukraine said, you know, we basically didn't have a choice. It was human life is the highest value to us. We have to do everything possible to terminate the bloodshed. That was the president of the Ukraine who said that. Let me get your reaction to that. And who wins in this ceasefire here? Putin, right?
Well, sure, Putin wins the ceasefire because Putin's now controlling parts of eastern Ukraine. This is not really an a military story, Heather. It's economics. And that's why the president, Poroshenko, said we had no choice. We had to agree to a ceasefire. Why? Because the Ukrainian economy is in free fall. They're about to go into a winter. They have no reserves. They don't have the natural gas they need to keep their people warm in the winter. And the longer this fighting goes on, the worse the Ukrainian economy gets.
KT, why aren't we arming the Ukrainians to help them help themselves and stop Vladimir Putin?
Well, I think it's a really good point. You know, if the Ukrainians are willing to fight, we should give them the equipment. When I was there in June, derisively, some of the Ukrainian military people said, well, you know, you've given us meals ready to eat. We've asked you for vests. We've asked you for night vision goggles. We've asked you to share intelligence. And you've always said, well, we'll get around to it. We'll get around to it. So the United States may talk a good game. And when you listen to the president, it sounded like we were. But the fact is we have not delivered on our words.
Well, the president saying today that we will offer some non-lethal aid to them to help out. It could take the form of some flak jackets and the like. But, KT, we're going to have to leave it there. Have a terrific weekend. KT McFarland, national security analyst for Fox News. Thanks so much, as always, for joining us.
Thanks, Heather.